Over 200 global brands didn't call the WTA. They called Eala directly. The organization that governs women's tennis worldwide was left frozen, watching from the sideline as a 20-year-old from the Philippines rewrote every rule they thought still existed. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a statement. Because somewhere between beating the world's #2 player on a Wednesday afternoon in Miami and covering the front page of Vogue in Manila, Alexandra Eala stopped being just a tennis player. She became something the WTA never fully prepared for. A cultural phenomenon with commercial gravity so powerful, corporations skipped the gatekeepers entirely. And when the WTA board finally realized what was happening, it was already too late to control it. Stay until the very end of this video, because what unfolded behind closed doors will permanently change how you view women's tennis, power, and who actually holds it. Nobody handed Alex Eala a red carpet. She built one, baseline by baseline, tournament by tournament, humiliation by humiliation, until the entire world had no choice but to stand on it beside her. Born on May 23, 2005 in Quezon City, Philippines, Alexandra Maniego Eala entered a tennis world that had never truly made space for someone like her. The sports commercial machine revolved around three names: Aryna Sabalenka, Iga Świątek, and Coco Gauff. Grand Slam champions, household names, marketing giants in their own right. Every major brand deal, every prime tournament slot, every editorial spread in European sports publications, it all orbited those three women. The WTA's entire promotional framework was built around them. Alex Eala didn't fit that framework. She came from the Philippines, a nation whose sporting identity was forged in boxing rings and basketball courts, not clay courts. Tennis there was an elite hobby, not a national obsession. And yet, at 12 years old, Eala was already training at the Rafael Nadal Academy in Mallorca, Spain, the same institution that shaped one of the greatest players in human history. Something about that detail alone should have signaled to everyone paying attention. This girl wasn't arriving to participate. She was arriving to disrupt. By 2022, she had already become the first Filipino to win a Grand Slam junior singles title, the U.S. Open Girls Championship. The achievement earned polite applause globally, but seismic celebration in the Philippines. Her face appeared everywhere back home. Globe Telecom, which had signed her as a brand ambassador at just 8 years old, yes, 8, suddenly understood they were sitting on something extraordinary. Babolat had already locked down her racket contract. Nike had her on court in their colors. The Bank of the Philippine Islands aligned with her story of discipline and ambition. Locally Juice came aboard in mid-2025. By every reasonable metric, a 20-year-old ranked outside the WTA top 100 should not command that kind of commercial attention. The rankings said she was a prospect, the market said she was a phenomenon, and those two realities were about to collide in the most dramatic fashion women's tennis had ever witnessed. But before any boardroom shook, before a single press release landed on a CEO's desk uninvited, there was one afternoon in Miami that changed everything. March 2025, the WTA 1000 Miami Open. Alex Eala walks onto the court ranked number 140 in the world, holding a wildcard, the tennis equivalent of being led into a gala through the service entrance. What followed over the next several days defied every probability model, every seeding logic, every bracket prediction. She defeated Jelena Ostapenko, then Madison Keys, the reigning Australian Open champion, ranked number 5 in the world, and then in a quarterfinal that stopped millions of people mid-scroll across Southeast Asia, Europe, and the Americas, she defeated Iga Świątek, the world number 2, 5-time Grand Slam champion, one of the most dominant players of the modern era. The Philippines didn't sleep that night. Literally. Fans across 12 time zones stayed up through the small hours watching illegal live streams because there was no local television carrier for WTA matches, and the demand was so overwhelming that a network of enterprising fans known informally as the Gcash Boys on Facebook had already built a shadow broadcasting economy around Eala's matches. The WTA's official broadcast infrastructure could not contain the hunger for this story. People found a way regardless. That semifinal run, which ended against Jessica Pegula, catapulted Eala from number 140 to a career-high number 75 virtually overnight. She became the first Filipino ever to reach a WTA 1000 event semifinal, the first Filipino woman to defeat a Grand Slam champion at tour level, the first Filipino to crack the WTA Top 100. And then the phones started ringing. Not at the WTA offices, not through official channels, not through the formal sponsorship pipelines that sports governing bodies carefully curate and monetize. The phones rang directly at Eala's management team, in her inbox, in the DMs of people connected to her inner circle. Sky Sports lead presenter Gigi Salmon, speaking at a London tennis event, captured the moment perfectly. I would say, in terms of her appeal, the crowds that follow her, she might already be the biggest star. She wasn't talking about rankings. She wasn't talking about Grand Slam titles. She was talking about something far more powerful and far less controllable: magnetism. And 200 corporations around the world felt it simultaneously.
Here is where the story shifts from inspiring to genuinely seismic. Ordinarily, when a tennis player reaches commercial viability, the process is orderly. Brands approach the WTA. The WTA has established frameworks for official sponsorships, ambassador programs, co-branded activations. The organization sits at the center of every transaction, extracting licensing fees, approval rights, and promotional obligations. It is a well-oiled machine designed to ensure that the institution, not the individual, holds ultimate commercial leverage. Alex Eala didn't break that machine. She simply made it irrelevant. Reports filtering through the tennis business world, from agents, from sports marketing executives, from insiders at major consumer goods companies, painted a picture the WTA had never encountered at this scale. An estimated 200-plus global enterprises spanning fashion, technology, luxury goods, fast-moving consumer products, financial services, automotive brands, and streaming platforms had reached out to Eala's team without any coordination with or notification to the WTA whatsoever. Think about what that number means. Not 20 brands, not 50, over 200. Brands were treating her the way they treat once-in-a-generation cultural moments, the way they treated Michael Jordan in 1984, the way they pursued Serena Williams at her peak, the way they stampeded toward Emma Raducanu in the 48 hours after her 2021 U.S. Open victory. Except, Eala hadn't won a Grand Slam. She hadn't even cracked the top 20. Yet the commercial machinery was responding as if she already had, and responding directly, privately, urgently. The reason, insiders explained, was threefold. First, market geography. Eala commanded fierce, deeply personal followings in the Philippines, Japan, and China, three of the most coveted and notoriously difficult consumer demographics on Earth. Brands that had spent decades trying to authentically penetrate those markets saw in Eala something no advertising campaign could manufacture: genuine, organic, emotional belonging. She wasn't a foreign star being imported, she was theirs. Second, generational resonance. At 20 years old, Eala's Instagram had already surged past 350,000 followers after Miami alone, with projections suggesting exponential growth. Her online presence wasn't managed with the sterile precision of a PR-controlled corporate athlete. It felt real, candid, warm, vulnerable, the kind of connection that Gen Z consumers reward with loyalty. And Gen Z consumers are exactly who every major brand on Earth is currently fighting over. Third, and this is the detail that made WTA executives genuinely uncomfortable, Eala's appeal transcended tennis. She appeared on the covers of Tatler and Vogue in the Philippines. She was awarded the Premios Tangla Trophy by the Philippine Embassy in Spain. She was praised by the Philippine Sports Writers Association for 8 consecutive years. Sports journalist Diane Castillo noted bluntly that she was already being treated like a multiple Grand Slam winner by the public, by the media, and now, unmistakably, by commerce. The WTA board, accustomed to being the architect of such moments, suddenly found themselves reading about it secondhand. Let's be direct about something the mainstream tennis press has been reluctant to examine out loud. When 200 global brands bypass an institution as powerful and established as the WTA to deal directly with one of its players, that is not a coincidence, that is not an accident of timing, that is a verdict, delivered without ceremony, without a press release, and without appeal. The WTA has invested enormous energy into building a commercial ecosystem that positions the organization, not individual athletes, as the primary draw. The tour's sponsorship deals, broadcast agreements, and brand partnerships are collectively negotiated and collectively valued. Individual players benefit from the structure, yes, but the structure also depends on keeping the commercial narrative centered on the institution rather than any single human being. Alex Eala, without intending to, and without any act of rebellion, had shattered that balance. The internal discomfort within WTA leadership was palpable to those close enough to observe it. Here was a player who hadn't yet won a WTA tour-level title. She had claimed a WTA 125 title in Guadalajara in September 2025, becoming the first Filipina to achieve that milestone, and had reached a 250-level final at Eastbourne, but whose commercial value had already leapfrogged players with far superior ranking credentials. Meanwhile, Eala herself moved through all of this with a disarming, almost destabilizing grace. At a post-match ceremony in Indian Wells in March 2026, by which point she had climbed to a career-high ranking of number 29, she spoke about the WTA with generous warmth. "I think the WTA is a great platform for us professional women tennis players. I'm very grateful for everything they've built for us, giving us a chance to become these stars." She was praising the organization that was quietly grappling with the fact that her very existence was rearranging its commercial architecture. And that tension between her gratitude and her gravitational pull is precisely what makes the story so complicated. Because Eala wasn't fighting the WTA, she was simply outgrowing it, in real time, in public, involuntarily. The brands bypassed the WTA not out of disrespect, they bypassed it because they understood something the institution was slow to acknowledge. When an athlete achieves a certain level of cultural mass, no organization can contain or monetize it faster than the market moves on its own.
Strip away the drama, and what remains is a genuine structural question that the sports business world is now actively debating because of one 20-year-old from the Philippines. Should governing bodies like the WTA hold licensing authority over athletes' individual commercial identities? And when an athlete's cultural value exceeds the organization's own brand equity in specific markets, who, exactly, should benefit from that value, and in what proportion? These questions are not unique to tennis. They emerged in women's basketball with Caitlin Clark. They surfaced in soccer with specific Champions League stars. But in women's tennis, where the WTA has historically maintained tighter control over its commercial ecosystem than many comparable organizations, the Eala situation has forced the conversation with particular urgency. Multiple sports marketing executives, speaking anonymously to industry publications, have framed the situation clearly. Eala's profile in Southeast Asia currently exceeds the WTA Tour's own brand recognition in those territories. Brands entering those markets don't need the WTA's logo, they need her face. That dynamic fundamentally inverts the traditional power relationship between governing body and athlete. What makes this even more remarkable is the timeline.
In January 2025, Eala was ranked 140. By March 2026, she had reached number 29, the highest ranking ever achieved by a Filipino tennis player in history. That 14-month arc from wildcard entrant to legitimate top 30 force generated commercial interest at a pace the WTA's own promotional infrastructure simply couldn't process. The brands didn't wait for the institution to catch up. They acted. And Ayala's real endorsement portfolio, Nike, Babolat, Globe Telecom, Bank of the Philippine Islands, Locally Juice, was already considered the foundation of something far larger. Sports industry analysts openly compared her trajectory to Emma Raducanu's post-2021 U.S. Open commercial explosion, noting that Raducanu secured landmark deals before she had won her second major title. Eala was on a parallel runway, except her cultural reach extended across markets Raducanu never penetrated. The comparison to Manny Pacquiao's cultural moment in Philippine sports history had begun circulating among serious analysts, not as hyperbole, but as measured observation. Pacquiao didn't just win fights, he realigned an entire nation's emotional relationship with global competition. Eala, in her own quieter, more cerebral way, was engineering the same phenomenon on tennis courts. And she hadn't even reached her peak yet. She once said, simply, "My dreams have stayed the same, stayed constant. I have always been a big dreamer. To win Grand Slams has always been one of the end goals. To become number one has always been one of the end goals." 200 corporations just bet real money that she means every word. Every generation produces one athlete who forces their sport to evolve faster than the sport wanted to. Alex Eala might be that athlete for women's tennis. She is doing something genuinely unprecedented, not through controversy, not through conflict, not through any calculated rebellion. She is reshaping the commercial and cultural geography of the WTA simply by being exactly who she is, in exactly the markets the sport had never fully activated. Think about what has already happened. She is the first Filipino to break into the WTA top 30, the first to win a WTA challenger level event, the first to defeat a Grand Slam champion at tour level, the first to reach a WTA 1000 semifinal, the first Filipino to win a junior Grand Slam singles title. Every record she sets doesn't just belong to the Philippines, it belongs to every nation that has watched global sports ignore them for decades, wondering when someone would finally arrive who made the establishment pay attention. And the establishment is paying attention now, not entirely on its own terms, not through its own controlled channels, but paying attention nonetheless. The WTA, to its credit, is positioned to benefit enormously from Eala's rise, if it navigates the next several years with wisdom rather than institutional defensiveness. The organization's commercial value in Asia, a market it has long been attempting to meaningfully penetrate, has increased measurably because of one player's results on court. That is an opportunity, not a threat, if the people in power choose to see it that way. But the deeper legacy Eala is building has nothing to do with boardrooms or brand deals. It lives in the Philippine child watching her on a phone screen at 3 in the morning, willing to sacrifice sleep because someone who looks like them is competing at the highest level of a sport the world told them wasn't theirs. It lives in the Southeast Asian teenager picking up a racket for the first time because a 20-year-old from Quezon City just proved the world's top players are beatable. And Ayala's own words when she reflected on the moment she realized her platform extended beyond the score, "I would love to think that I make a difference." She already has. And here is the question worth sitting with, the one that will define the next chapter of not just Alex Ayala's career, but the future structure of women's professional tennis. When an athlete's cultural power outgrows the institution meant to govern her, who actually holds the authority, and should that authority ever have belonged to the institution in the first place? Drop your answer below, because this conversation is just getting started. Alex Eala arrived at the world's biggest tennis tournament as a wild card. She left as a commercial force that 200 global corporations chased without asking permission from anyone. The WTA board watched it happen in real time, and the tennis world is still processing what it means. This 20-year-old from the Philippines didn't demand a seat at the table. She built an entirely different table, and the market followed her to it.
If this story moved you, subscribe right now. Hit that bell because the Eala era in women's tennis is just beginning, and you do not want to miss a single chapter of what comes next.